There was a controversy. The controversy as to whether or not Moses actually wrote the Torah. I didn't realize there was a controversy, but you were able to make a whole documentary about it. What's this?
I didn't know there was a controversy either. I think if you go to, let's say, if you're a Bible believer and you're raised believing it, but as you grow up, some people go off to school and sometimes even to, let's say, a Christian educational facility, a lot of them are saying, well, we don't know if Moses actually wrote the first books of the Bible. We don't really know if it was him or if it was, there's something called higher criticism. And this higher criticism started in Germany and it spread. And a lot of the ideas of higher criticism have been refuted, but they still keep teaching it to students. And I have experience where students have called me for, there was a young woman who told me, she said she converted to Christianity and she went to college and she went to a Christian school, and the professor said that, none of this is true. And then she was like in trauma. She said, well, why in the world did I become a believer if it's not true? Because you see, even Jesus talks about Moses, and all the prophets and the Apostle Paul, they talk about these events that happen. The Bible constantly references back to the events of the Exodus. And if it's not true, then it's like a house of cards. That's why it was so important. And so I felt that the attack on the writing of the Bible was something I wanted to address. And so this question about miracles, and do miracles happen, and can we take the testimony of a reliable witness? And that's this clip. It might be a little bit shorter, but it's going to be a clip that will be talking about miracles and the fact that we can actually take the eyewitness account for what it's telling us, and that an eyewitness account is what Moses was giving us, and he was documenting what he saw God do during the time of the Exodus. And that's why I felt that making this film and clarifying evidence for the ability to write. And I can't show all the whole information, but what we uncover is that at the very time, in the very place that the Israelites were in Egypt, the alphabet starts to show up. And so this film is basically saying that we see a connection between the alphabet and between God giving the ability to write, so that people could write his commands on their doorposts. And that's why this is so powerful and so exciting.
All right, sounds great. Let's take a look.
As I filmed Moeller walking along the shore of the Gulf of Aqaba, I was filled with a sense of awe. If you were to pick a location to part the water, this would have been one of the most spectacular places to do it.
And Moses said to the people, "Fear not, stand firm, and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will work for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to remain silent." Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night and made the sea dry land. The waters were divided. People of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, the waters being a wall to them on their right hand and on their left. And the psalmist says, "When the waters saw you, O God, they were afraid. Indeed, the deep trembled. The clouds poured out water. The crash of your thunder was in the whirlwind. Your lightnings lighted up the world, and the earth trembled and shook. Your way was through the sea, your path through the great waters. yet your footprints were unseen.
The Exodus story is a combination of miracles and history. Now, the miracles you can't deal with archaeologically or rationally because they're miracles.
I went to Washington, D.C. to talk with Herschel Shanks, the founder and editor of Biblical Archaeology Review. He is an attorney who became interested in the archaeology and the history of the Bible after visiting Israel, the land of his heritage.
Whether the Red Sea parted is a miracle. Whether the 10 plagues happened is a miracle. I mean, you have one of the plagues was darkness, and you had darkness where the Egyptians were, and right beside them in the different area was the Israelites were, and it was light there. Well, you know, that rationally that may not make sense, but miracles, you can do anything. So you have elements of miracles, and we cannot ask ourselves rationally whether they occurred.
Thanks for that clip, Tim. I think that's really important to note that, if Moses didn't write the Torah, then what do we have? In fact, Nehemiah Gordon has told me in the past that many Jews don't believe that the Exodus ever happened. So where does their faith even come from? So I'm glad that your documentary puts that to rest. Now, as we mentioned in the beginning here, we wanted to say that Passover is not just a thing that happened in the past. It's relevant to today. And I think when the adversary chases us down with something he's lied to us about, we feel like we've escaped, but now we're being chased again, that we can look to the Exodus for freedom again in what God did for the Israelites going through the Red Sea and destroying his enemies.
That's right. And that's why I picked this next clip is that, first of all, it's kind of fun and adventuresome. But, the Passover is really about, the Israelites being spared from the angel of death and being allowed, that final plague, allowed the Israelites to be released by Pharaoh. But then again, he changes his mind after a while, and he pursues them. And this is Pharaoh, chasing the Israelites into the sea. And is there any evidence then of Pharaoh's army on the seafloor? And that's why I wanted to put this clip in here, talking about some evidence that I had known about for 20 years, but it wasn't until literally about a year ago when I was able to make the interview and get this information put together. And it's pretty fascinating. And that's why I wanted to share it, because once again, do we have credible witnesses? There's so many claims that people are making about evidence. And what I've just tried to do is say, okay, I'm going to listen to multiple viewpoints. And I'm going to basically let, if someone's saying they saw a chariot wheel, or someone saying that they, found something, okay, explain what it is and why do you think it's this, and let's just see if it can stand the criticism and the scrutiny of everything. But I put this interview in with Eric Lemke because I felt that he was a trustworthy witness, and what he saw and what he encountered was very, very powerful as far as the testimony goes. And so, it's hard to refute testimony, and that's why going back to testimonies. Let's just say your own life. You've had an experience with the Lord, it's changed your life, and it's the testimony. And I think in many cases, it's our testimony that's so important, that we testify that God has done something or God has been faithful. And I think that that's why God is telling, do not forget what I did in the Exodus by bringing you up out of Egypt. He's trying to remember, and I think it's easy. Right now, at this time, it's easy for us to forget what God did for us even a year ago or 2 years ago, because we're like those Israelites that say, why did you bring us out into Egypt to die? They complained to Moses, and what God told Moses was stand firm and see what God will do. He's going to destroy this army before your very eyes. And I think maybe some of your people, all of us are at that place at times, and we're saying, okay, God, what are we going to do? And he's saying, stand firm and see what God's going to do. So let's look at this clip.
From the beginning of my involvement, I had heard about Eric Lemke finding a spoked wheel on the sea floor. His discovery came 9 years after Wyatt had found his golden wheel. I was cautious about the report of Eric's find. He too had waited over 2 decades until he found someone he felt he could trust with his story. This would be his first public retelling of the events. Explain to me what happened one day when you were diving.
Sure. That was, like I mentioned before, the spring of 1997. There were 4 of us on that trip. It was myself, Ron Wyatt, Dr. Moeller, and an individual that he brought along by the name of Rory. Towards the end of the dive, we came back up, did our safety stop at 15 feet to decompress. And once we came to the surface, there was only 3 of us there. Myself, Ron, and Leonard. So I said, hey, where's Rory? And you could see his bubbles off in the distance, trailing deeper where it started to drop off. I said, listen, if one of us doesn't go back down, something's wrong, he's not gonna make it. So I submerged and I got down to about 60 to 80 feet and my eye caught something. It was circular in nature and you could clearly see the circumference of a round object, a rim.
Did you see any spokes?
Definitely, yeah. There was a hub in the center that was clearly visible, and it was roughly about, I would say, describe it as a grapefruit. Very smooth in nature, almost like a grapefruit cut in half, like a hub.
And had you ever seen a chariot wheel before?
Oh yes, yeah, I've seen chariot wheels in the Cairo Museum. I don't know if they're ceremonial in nature, but this one was definitely a little bit thicker. So it was like a dirty bronze color, very dark in nature. And this was the only time that I had seen anything definitive, period, that looked, that resembled an ancient wheel.
So what happened to then Rory? Is he swimming off?
Yeah, I realized at that time, you know, my air was getting low, and I'm looking off in the distance, and he's still swimming in a straight line, going out deeper. And I knew at that time that I couldn't catch him with the limited air I had left. And I literally just start motioning like this underwater. All of a sudden, he stops. He spun around. We caught our eyes. I said, look at me in the goggles. And I motioned him, come here. I pointed like this. I was right over the top of it, trying not to move. And when his eyes saw it, and he looked up, they got really big in the goggles.
I lost my octopus, my mouthpiece. I was so surprised when I saw it and so excited.
His first reaction was to go down to it and grab it, like he was trying to pull it off the bottom.
I could see clearly 5 of the 6 spokes, as well as the rim, at least 75% of it.
The silt was really stirred up.
I was trying to lift up the chariot wheel, but the problem was it was too heavy. Now I was really out of air.
He gave the dreaded, I'm out of air.
Then you're 90 feet below.
Yes, approximately 95 feet below the surface. So I grabbed his vest and held onto it, and it inflated my BC, my buoyancy compensator, with as much air as I could, and literally just shot straight to the surface like a cork, without initiating a safety stop at 15 feet to decompress.
Yep.
We surfaced just a little bit too quickly, and as a result of that, there was some kind of bends that I got.
I mean, that's a very dangerous thing, but it's
Yes.
all you can do, right? Because you're going to run out of oil.
Well, yeah, just the first reaction is, I got to get to the top. Well, we popped to the surface, and my first reaction was, Ron, we've got a wheel. I'm not moving from this spot. And Ron, remember, he said, well, you may not be moving, but the current's moving you, fella. And sure enough, we were drifting.
Because some people would say, well, why in the world didn't you have a camera?
On that last dive, I wasn't carrying the camera, Ron was.
You were carrying the light.
I had the light, correct.
Searching for this evidence was one reason I traveled to Nueva Beach with Leonard Moeller back in 2002. Yet, after all these years, no one has been able to relocate the wheel. All we have are the eyewitness accounts.
You know, Tim, these patterns of evidence, as you call them, are very compelling. And I think that's why folks really need to get these movies and have them on hand. We're going to talk about that in a second. But it's because we're up against cancel culture, right? I mean, and cancel culture doesn't start now. It started way back in Exodus. You know, Pharaoh was trying to cancel the Israelites. We get to Yeshua's time. Herod was trying to cancel all the baby boys in the Hebrew world. And then we look at the Holocaust and what's happening now. It seems like every time people make a stand for God, someone tries to, quote unquote, cancel them.
That's correct. And, you know, Jesus, told us that he would be, that we would, if we're we shouldn't expect anything different than what happened to him. You know, if they despised him, they would despise us as well. And so I think that there aren't as many bookstores around that carry content anymore. So it's very important to have your own collection of material, physical material that you can have for your family and friends. And I think that you're seeing, surprising, very bold, a lot of boldness that's going on by companies, high-tech companies, and that are like we're saying, canceling or taking out stuff. And who knows where we'll be in a year or two, where it will be hard to distribute or hard to have programming. And I can't believe we're saying this, but we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual, principalities that are coming against many people today. So it's important for us to be strong and courageous and to continue to do the work. But I think one of them is to be equipped. Some people are, trying to have food and stockpile stuff for hard times. But I think you need to also stockpile your biblical content and have it so that you have information that you can share with your family and friends, because it could be a life or death experience for them spiritually. Because there's so many things that are confusing people today.
That's right, indeed. Like you said, you got to have your food, but you've got to have your spiritual food as well. And I think this is indeed that spiritual food, because even if it all goes to quote unquote hell in a handbasket, if this is the last thing they see, it may spark that faith they have in the Bible and affect them for all time, for all eternity, really, is what you're saying. So I totally agree with that. Tim, thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Again, get your hard copies of these movies. You can see, or documentaries rather, but you can see the information on the bottom of your screen as to how to get that. And Tim, as I understand, you actually have some bonus content coming out as well. Is that right?
We do. We've been taking all these films and creating collector's box editions with 8 hours of bonus material. So that's just going through all that material. We've got 32 hours of additional content on all these films, which will give some of those people who want to dig deeper an awful lot to chew on. All right. Now, how can folks find that when it's ready to go? Well, we can let you know, and you can let everybody know. But they can keep track. They can become a thinker and sign up to be a thinker, which is a weekly email, thinker updates at patternsofevidence.com. Patternsofevidence.com is where you can sign up to become a thinker, and also check us out on the Historical Faith Society and support biblical archaeology at the historicalfaithsociety.com. All right. Thanks again, Tim. And thank you for joining us at Passover 2021. Let my people go.